Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast. We're your hosts, Karan and Kristen. On this podcast, we are highlighting ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble.
Today we are talking with Chad and Melissa Curtis. Chad and Melissa are parents and personal growth mentors. They are founders of Inner Architect, which is a place for couples and parents to meaningfully connect, communicate effectively, break cycles, and learn to intentionally parent their kids. And this is, I think, the second time we've had two people on at once, so we're excited to be talking with both of you today as well.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
We're excited.
So, Chad and Melissa, we'd love to hear about your pirate journey, both separate and together. What led you to where you are today?
Would you like to start?
I can start. So I am a newly found pirate in the last probably a few years of our life. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Gretchen Rubin's different personality traits, but if you take her test, I am an upholder through and through. And I married a rebel through and through. And he has since then transformed me into being more of a responsible, rebellious pirate. And I've come to love it. So yeah, we're doing a lot about rebelling pirate life. Especially you've caught us at a really great time in our life because we are literally flipping pretty much everything.
Burn it down, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. So listeners can just buckle up because there's a lot here in terms of personal and then going into professional and our lives and our roles as parents and what we're trying to do professionally. This moment in time, we are, as Melissa alluded to, we're selling our home. We just sold our business. We are moving out of New York State, heading to Florida. No, we don't have any family. And prior to deciding to move, we didn't know anyone there. Coincidentally, there's actually 3 other couples that are all moving to the same, they're either already there or in the process of moving to the exact same area. So we actually will know some people down there. They live a very similar lifestyle to us, similar principles, similar parenting approaches. So it's really great. How we got here, I've always had a difficult time with structure and authority, even when I impose it on myself. And so I've made it a pretty steady practice throughout my life of just restarting, burning stuff down, moving on to the next thing. I would say at this point, I'm 40. At this point, the most consistent thing that I've ever done other than stay alive for 40 years is be with Melissa and be a parent to our 2 little girls. Outside of that, I have very little ties to anything. I didn't grow up with a close family structure. Grew up in a household with a lot of abuse and neglect. I often cite, going through the Unlifted program, I cited that my mom is literally the poster child for victim mentality, a walking, living, breathing representation of all of it. So a lot of this my life has been me peeling that apart and reshaping that. And thankfully, Melissa we started dating almost 20 years ago. So she has been a consistent, steadfast, reliable part of my life that has allowed me to explore and shake things up. And as she mentioned, we've assimilated some of one another's traits over the years in a really positive way, where I've become more reliable, a lot less reactive, a lot less like fuck the world, burn it down, more like let's fix the world and burn this part down, but then build this over here better. sort of thing. So I served in the military, I was in the Marine Corps for 6 years. When after I got out, she got a job offer in California and was like, "Do you want to move to California?" I said, "Sure." We are on a hiatus on our relationship, living in different cities, and I'm mostly getting drunk in my underwear, so I'll go to Florida or California. So we did.
Yeah, I guess that was the start of like, let's live our own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we didn't know anyone
there either.
We moved out there. We lived there for 5 years. Decided, not necessarily on a whim, but pretty abruptly, to leave our teaching positions. I actually started teaching out there. That's the job she got, was as a teacher. So we both taught health and phys ed for 5 years. And then a buddy of mine from the Marine Corps had gotten out. We talked about opening a gym. So we moved back from California, quit our very stable, nicely salaried and benefits and all that stuff, teaching job, left our home in Southern California to move back to majestic Rochester, New York, and live in my friend's basement. And we did that. We built our gym for 11 years now. We just sold it. Along the way, we made sure to carve our own path within that space. So it was a CrossFit gym to start with initially, and we said from day one that this is and always will be done the way that it seems like it needs to be done for our clients' benefit, not the way that everyone perceives it needs to be done, which was difficult often because there were things that we were doing that were not necessarily the norm in the industry, and sometimes that was well received and sometimes it wasn't.
We've always prioritized learning and growing for ourselves. Mm-hmm. So it was hard to have this knowledge and watch what was happening in the fitness industry and turn a blind eye to the things that were happening under our roof in our gym, right? Yeah. People getting sicker instead of healthier coming into our gym, getting injured, staying injured, right? So we did a lot of shifting in ways that some people didn't agree with, for sure.
Sure. Yeah. It was less fun at times for them. So, as we transitioned into the last few years, I'll back up because our oldest daughter is 6.5 and our youngest is 4. So right before Dylan, our oldest, was born, I had a freak out moment. I said, we have no reliable income and no health insurance or anything in the gym. And I had an opportunity to leave and take a job because a buddy of mine was stepping down from his position as a program manager for a local veteran nonprofit that worked with guys with PTSD and traumatic brain injury. So I took that position, worked there for about 2 years, absolutely loved the mission, loved what the people that I worked with, boots on the ground. If those two things had been the only things that I needed to contend with, I'd still be there. They were doing beautiful work. Unfortunately, the parent company that owned us had horrendous leadership, and myself and the CEO just constantly butt heads. Like we were at war for 2 years straight, and it was exhausting. But one of the things that did was it reinstated a desire for learning and growth again, outside of the health and fitness space for me, and by proxy for Melissa as well, because I realized at that point, I'm like, I've been in sweatpants for the last 10 years of my life, and now I got to go around and talk about what this program is and pitch it essentially to these other agencies and things along that line. I have nothing. I can tell them, hey, I just clean and jerk 275 the other day. That was cool. And they'll be like, I don't know what that means. So I started reading and listening to books and podcasts. I actually, on a whim, decided to start meditating and journaling because I heard Tim Ferriss say it on a podcast, and started doing that. And that was the first time that I really noticed in my life, and Melissa pointed out to me one day, where I could find some stillness and some space in my mind and in the way that I respond to situations. So that was about 7 years ago or so. And then throughout that, I became more interested in things that were kind of outside the norm in terms of mental health and treatment, specifically for the guys that were in our program. So I was looking at sensory deprivation tanks, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. We were looking into various like somatic release stuff, just different things other than we had a lot of guys that came from the VA that were on, 10, 15 medications at 23 years old. And it didn't sit right with me. One of the things that came up a lot in discussion privately with the guys was use of plant medicines, and whether it be cannabis or anything else to work through this. And at that time, which was, like I said, about 6, 7 years ago, it wasn't quite as prevalent as it is now in terms of research being done and those sort of things. But it was a real steady topic of conversation to the point where Melissa's like, will you just go do some drugs? I know what you want to do. I'm like, that's not what I want to do. I used to do that a lot and I have access to those things, Mm-hmm. So we ended up, fast forward, we ended up, during COVID, shutting the gym down and running through all that with our business. And it gave us some beautiful time to reflect on like what we really mm-hmm. wanted to do and how we wanted our lives to look around these things, both professionally and personally. So we had a lot of space and time with the girls and with each other and just deep discussions. Melissa and I have really cultivated over the years a degree of communication with one another that we just frankly don't see in a lot of other couples. And it's not to knock anyone down. Like, we just went through some shit early in our relationship. I was kind of an asshole, and not kind of, I was. Soft talk acknowledged. I was frequently an asshole. and through that, we grew with all of those lumps. And so I ended up having the opportunity through a friend of ours to be introduced to a community that's doing medicine work, and was able to go down and start that about a year and a half or so ago. And that is something that has really transformed a lot of not only my life personally, but our life as a family. Mm-hmm. The first time I went down, Melissa was like, "This is great." She's super supportive. I love what you're talking about. Read my journal to her. This sounds amazing. You keep doing it. Not interested. And, for context, I was a partier when I was young, and I was wild, violent, crazy, drugs, alcohol, sex, rock and roll, the whole nine. And she was not. The opposite of those things. So what's been interesting is now we've been working in that arena for the last year, just about.
Yeah, it'll be a year in May.
Mm-hmm. And to the point where we've hosted ceremonies in our home. I've done integration work using enlifted methods and story working pre and post ceremonies with people that are coming down, and that stuff pairs really well together. And then looking forward, part of what we're moving toward as we go down to Florida is one of the couples that's down there with us, our buddy Kurt. He is going to be partnering with us in a business and reopening a brick and mortar and having it be this health, wellness, healing center. My sister's also an art therapist, and so she's going to be a part of that as well. So having this place that is more of a retreat-based, appointment-based center where we can bring a variety of different modalities of health and healing together for individuals, for couples, for families.
Yeah. And
so it's kind of pushed us all of these things have pushed us towards this direction in a way that is very, it's outside the norm. It's probably less outside the norm now than it has been in the past, but it's still pretty fringe in terms of combining some of these different modalities of health and wellness and healing into one place, and using things that are not necessarily, that there's still a lot of stigma around, whether it's GOTA for the movement principles is what our buddy Kurt is bringing to the table, whether it's sitting in, ice and heat immersion and plant medicine stuff and art therapy and like just different things that we're bringing to the table.
Even just the way we're parenting our children and the methods that we're going to bring to families to be able to effectively do that in an intentional way.
Yeah, that has been a huge part. It feels piratey to me because I have fucking zero map on how to be a good parent, going through this stuff. So personally, I've gotten to this point where I understand my mom and the stuff that she endured as a woman and as just a human being on here, and how she did the best that she could for us. And at the same time, we had no example of, my sister and I, of positive parenting role models. And so I'm personally very much building that example myself in real time, building the parachute on the way down sort of scenario. And Melissa comes from a very different background with areas that can definitely be improved as well. Like a very supportive family. We used to joke that she was, I'd say her family is like a sitcom. Like, they argue and they're like mad at each other, and then everyone hugs at the end and everyone claps and we all go to bed. Like, I was like, and it was great because I got to see what a family unit could look like, and what people who didn't give up on each other and cared for each other and were there and present, what it could look like. And so she has a really strong foundation to build off of.
Yes. And we created one as well. Like, we made sure that we were intentionally talking about how we were going to raise our kids and what that would look like prior to Dylan being born.
Yeah, which can be difficult. And I think, we just mentioned something earlier about there's a balance to be had with not being too judgmental around other parents and how they parent their kids. And at the same time, like, well, I don't want my girls to go to your house and eat a bunch of dog shit snacks all day and watch TV and then come home and be terrors because they're used to that. And so there's this weird fine line. And one of the things that's really nice about our move to Florida is, like I said, the families that are down there that we already know, they have children, our kids play together, and they share the same values. They're outside a lot. They're in nature. They eat healthy food. They're very active. They're moving around. Like they talk to their kids about consequences and emotions, and they have real heart-to-heart conversations, and they apologize. I mean, that was one of the biggest things that I started doing as soon as our oldest was about 2, like old enough to really kind of understand the conversation, was if I messed up, apologizing. I've never experienced that from a parent to this day. And recognizing that everyone is fallible, adults and children alike, and that we can all assume responsibility for those things. And these are things that when we pull our heads out of our little ostrich hole or bubble that we're in, and we step out of the echo chamber of people that we associate with, we're like, oh, there's a bunch of crazy shit happening around in this world. And a lot of it has to do with people choosing one path, whether it's as individuals, as parents, combination, professionally, whatever it is, choosing this path that they're being directed toward. It's well trodden, and they're told this is the way to go, and they do it. And then as they're going down, they're like, this way is kind of fucked up, but now I'm so far down and I don't know what to do. And then it's even scarier to step away. I mean, how many conversations have we had with regards to this move with people that go something along the lines of, oh man, that's so cool, I wish I could do that. Well, you can. You can do it. You could do, it's all choice, right? There are consequences and there's things to be considered for sure, but a lot of us feel so trapped. And I think that's one of the things when I consider it, I'm really grateful for with Melissa and for our relationship, is that we see those things that are scary decisions and we're like, oh, should we do it? Because I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And then sometimes she's like, maybe not that. What about this? or she'll be like, I didn't think about that, mate. Let's consider it. And we're willing to look at what a tough decision might be, and for why would we do this? Like, what would the reason be? to go do that? And is the juice worth the squeeze, rather than just telling ourselves immediately that there is no option, and that, well, I gotta stay here. I gotta stay in this shitty dead end job that I hate.
Yeah.
Right. I gotta stay in this abusive, shitty relationship that brings me no joy, and in fact hurts me and puts me in a negative position. Right. It's not to downplay the gravity of making those choices. They're big choices. But, and you have a choice. They are ultimately choices, even when they really don't feel like it. I think that's something that we've cultivated a lot in the last 11 years, is just making the choice based on our gut and our conversations that we're having and what feels right.
Like, I think that's a really good point, is listening, like learning to finally listen to our gut and having the faith that it's going to work out. We don't really have a plan for Florida. We don't have a place to live. We don't know where our kids are going to school. We really and this is happening in like 4 months, 5 months. And, where we'll officially be down there, and, we're going to rent the first year. So we can't really do anything.
Or live in our car.
Yeah. We can't really can't really do anything more than like 6 weeks out. And we have enough contacts down there. Like, I have faith that we're not going to be homeless, but also if we are, it's warm. So we're not cold here. But we have like some people in our lives that are like, well, do you have a house? And we're like, no. And they're like,
it's really hard to get a house there.
I'm like, we'll figure it out. And this is the first time in my life where I feel like I'm like, it'll work out. Because we've talked a lot about, and my mom brought up this question of like making sure that you are running towards something, not running away from something. And yes, the weather was a big kind of push for us to leave New York, but mainly it started with conversations around COVID, what they were doing here, choosing for schools and vaccinations and things that were going to affect our children. So we really sat and looked like, are we giving up on the fight here in New York to run away because COVID regulations are different in Florida? Or are we running towards something that is more in alignment? And we really sat down and listed out, like, what are our core values? What do we want out of life? What do we want for our family? What do we want for our business? Who do we want to be surrounded with? What do we want the place to look like? Right. And New York just didn't match a lot to those things anymore.
Didn't check enough boxes.
Yeah. So that was a really cool conversation, and like a really nice turning point for me, to realize like having that faith and listening to your gut and not feeling like you need to have this sketched out plan from A to Z every minute of your life, because that's how I've lived a lot of it, is like, I need to know what's happening. I need to be able to prepare for it. So
I think you touched on something that I've really only relatively recently developed a stronger sense of, which is trust. And there was a few weeks ago, maybe a month or so now at this point, I was journaling in the morning, and I shared it with Melissa because it's just a day where I was ended up writing like 3 pages. And it was the first time that I can remember in my life where I genuinely felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything that had happened up until that day that I was writing, the good, the bad, the ugly. I felt present and calm and at peace with the present moment, and a sense of trust in the future and what's to come. And that's what you're touching on too, is that there's a lot of things that fell into place. I mean, I'm very grateful that it also just so happened we're making this move at a point where we were pivoting, and we're going to sell our business anyway. The housing market in Rochester is nuts for selling a house. So we're poised to make a significant amount of money off the sale of our house too, which affords us the ability to go down somewhere and not necessarily have a finely planned out agenda for what we're going to do professionally and personally. We have a little bit of space to create that and to work on it and build it in the way that we need to. So there's a lot of things that fell into place, and I'm getting more into a space where I just see that as trusting that if we're listening to our gut, we're making decisions that are in the best interest of ourselves, our family, the people that we're closest with, the communities that we align ourselves with, and the people that we're trying to serve, if we continue to just lean into making our choices based around doing what's best for those groups of people, then we can trust in whatever is to come. And I mean, like you said, the number of conversations people are like, what are you doing for work? I'm like, I don't know.
We'll figure it out.
Not much. At first, we'll get something. We'll have, but we're not. And even Melissa brought this up with a month or so ago with Inner Architect, and it's a new venture for us. And typically, we're closing out one shit show while building another one at the same time and planning for the next one after that. And we found ourselves starting to do that again with this business, where we're like, we got to get stuff rolling. So when we get to Florida, we're already like just firing on all cylinders. And that sounds great. Then we stopped. We're also leaving this place that we've lived for the last 11 years. We're selling our home. We're condensing our 2,400 square foot house and my sister's 2-bedroom apartment, because she's moving with us. We're condensing that into one pod. We're burning the fucking ships. Everything goes. Right? Our realtor came through our house list tomorrow, and he's like, do you want me to put anything else in there? We're like, everything's negotiable. Literally everything. Anything they see in here that they want to buy, tell them to let us know. We have some artwork and stuff that we'd like to keep. But other than that, it's up for grabs. And, we took that step, and we're going down there. And on top of that, we're trying to build a business. And Melissa stopped me a month or so ago and was like, let's not do this. We'll take clients. If there's someone that reaches out, we're not going to turn people away necessarily. Let's spend time with people here that we probably won't see a whole lot after we leave. Some of them we will, but once we leave here, we don't really have, other than coming back to visit friends, we don't have much of a reason to come back. Her family lives down in Long Island, New York, which is, about 8 hours from where we are now. So if we come back to New York, it'll most likely be there. It's not to say that we'll never come back to Rochester and visit. We might, but realistically thinking, there's a lot of people here that we may not ever see again. So let's spend some time. Let's say our goodbyes. Let's honor the relationships that we've had and the space that we've been in, and also just fucking chill.
We've worked really hard for 11 years. So
7 days a week.
Yeah. It's been nice.
It has. So that's the overall arching pirate theme story for us. And there's a lot of stuff, obviously, we could go in and unpack within each of those. So I'm happy to talk about whatever.
Yeah, there's a few things that we'd love to dive into. The first thing that came up for me that I wanted to hear more about was, you talked about the way that you're raising your children. And I'm making an assumption that it's also tied into the work that you're doing with parents with Inner Architect. And I'd love to hear more about that work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like I mentioned before, we and Chad, I think you might have even initiated a conversation before we even had children, when I was pregnant, let's sit down and have a conversation about our core values as a family. How do we want our family dynamic to run? What means the most to us? What does schooling look like? What does discipline look like? What does talking about, spirituality or religion, what does that look like? We literally talked about all the big major things.
What are the non-negotiable pillars of things that
and I think that a lot of people miss that step when they are deciding to have children, and then they get to a point where the baby's there. It's a very overwhelming time, and then those stages organically happen, and they're like, shit, I don't know, how would you do this? Well, you're talking to him about this and I'm talking to him about this, so it was a really nice way for us to have that foundation of how we wanted to parent.
What was the first step in creating proactive parenting versus reactive? Yes. And I would imagine, outside of combat, or if you're emergency responders or something along those lines, there's very few places in our life that are more prone to reactivity than raising children. I mean, there's no book you get, there's no instruction manual on how to do it. Each one's different.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
So
even if you have more than one and you think you know the book is different the second time.
Yeah, it was, our second book was very different than our first one. It was like a brand new author, everything. So a lot of what we try to do personally, and then we bring that into working with parents, is where can you find and create space to be proactive and intentional with how you parent your children versus just being reactively responding to them.
Well, and it started for me. I took being pregnant very seriously. Like, this is a time where I have the opportunity to create a human from scratch. Like, that's a big deal. And I took that very seriously. And the way I moved my body, the way I took care of my body, the way I ate, was very much with that in mind, where, how do I start this person off in the best way possible. Right. So I think that even that space and that intentional action starts even before the kid is there.
Yeah. And then we lean into creating positive practices that the whole family engages in. So we do, like, we do a spiritual Sunday where we sit down and we do a little bit of reading, we breathe, we do some gratefulness, the girls read some affirmations, and we have these different practices and we integrate them in a way. And it's not always easy. We've definitely done a bunch of different iterations of how this works, but we find ways to integrate these practices that we know are valuable for ourselves, and we include the girls. So, one example is every morning we start with a practice that a buddy of mine introduced me to. We call it's good, bad, ugly, and then grateful and what your intentions are for the day. So we each share what was your good from yesterday, something that was just awesome. Doesn't matter, big or small, something you did, something you saw or said or heard. Bad is anything that happened yesterday that was absolutely outside of your control. Then hint, nothing is a great answer, right? Because it's all in your control. Right. The one that comes up sometimes for us is weather. I don't get to control the weather. And then ugly is when you did or said or thought something that was outside of the best version of yourself. It was inauthentic to you. It wasn't representative of you firing on all cylinders. Then we share something we're grateful for and at least one intention, one thing that you will do today. And the girls do that with us every morning.
Yep.
And we do a little reading each morning. And so trying to help parents discover where it doesn't have to be what we do, but here are some things that we've tried, and here are some things that have stuck. And if you can incorporate these practices, then your kids will start to be inquisitive about them, and they'll start to want to some degree, learn about them, engage with them. And now you have these practices that are built in as a family.
I think it's also important to have them see you do things for yourself without them. So meditating on your own, getting in the ice, exercising, and holding those boundaries to show them that you deserve that time, right? And that by taking that time, it helps you show up as a better parent. So my mom specifically did a lot of those things, but she did them at 4 a.m. before we were ever awake. So it took me a long time to realize that was, instead of being feeling selfish about taking that time, it really is an important thing. It's important for parents to be able to take that time and have your kids understand where those boundaries need to be laid and respected, and that you deserve that time, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that come up that are in conversations with parents specifically that they feel a bit cliche or trite when you say them, but there's such truth to it, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. And a lot of people will, they'll put a post like that up on their Instagram and then just run themselves fucking ragged all day. And then be like, why am I a shitty parent yelling at my kids? Like, because you're not doing the thing that you said. You got 37 likes and a bunch of comments on it, but you don't actually do it. So how can we do that? What does filling your cup mean? Can we identify the things that help you show up better and feel better? Because if you're well rested and well fed and you generally feel good and have better energy, you're just able to contend with being a parent or being in a relationship with someone in a more reasonable and measured and grounded way. And so if we can help people find what works for them, and we offer suggestions of things that we've found to be valuable, try them. If it works, great. Let's identify what works and then move forward. And I think the biggest thing that I know I'll come back to a lot with people is that idea of creating space. And that's both within yourself, with your breath, with pausing in your language, with giving yourself a moment, and also with your partner, the communication with, your spouse or whomever that you're raising the children with, when you need the time away. Right. And that's something that we've gotten much, much better at in the last year or two. Like, I gotta go. I'm not prepared to manage this right now. Cool. High five. I'm in. Let's make the move and making sure to let people know that that's okay. That's not a failure on your part to say, I need a timeout. You are a human being. You need to be able to step away and recharge. And sometimes that means abruptly leaving the situation so that you don't have to, fix whatever mayhem you create reactively.
Yeah. Understanding. I mean, one of the mantras I use is my energy is contagious. And so if I can bring good to the situation, awesome. But like you said, if I know that my energy just isn't there to manage the mayhem or to, help the situation, it's better to tag out for sure. And we've done a nice job of being able to do that. And that's what our main goal working with couples and families is to be able to communicate that beforehand, before it gets to the screaming match or the mayhem that will inevitably ensue. So.
And then there's pretty uniform tactics that we talk about in terms of language, working on building in a lot of the Enlifted principles with how you talk to your kids, how you ask them to respond. A big one for us and for many parents is affirmations versus negations, right? It's so prevalent. Once you're like, oh my God. And it's like, sometimes you listen to people talk like, this is so fucking painful to hear it. And so we correct ourselves, we correct one another, and we're playful with it. It's not spiteful. And we talk to the girls about it. I don't want this. What do you want? Because all you're telling me is don't want this. I can't really help you until you tell me what you do want, and so just continuing to give those sort of exercises and tools to parents as well and say, just try this on for a while and stick with it. Stick with these things. See if you can start to change how you talk to yourself, to your spouse, to your children, and then how that starts to dwindle down, because it will, right? As much as it can be frustrating as a parent and, God, does my kid ever listen to anything I say? Every once in a while, you catch them doing something like, oh, you do listen. You're just a pain in my ass. I see you doing it over here. Our oldest was doing it to Melissa's mom for a while, because she's very I don't want this. I do it.
No, I need to.
I need to. Very pressure language. Yeah. Yes. Very, very, a lot of pressure from Gaga. And Dylan would be like, you don't need to go to Target. You want to. And I'm like, I just look at her and walk out of the room like, you got this.
Language has been a huge one. Self-regulation. So going back to that breath, talking them about how to breathe when they're amped up. Avoiding timeouts or things where they're being shunned when their emotions are heightened. So being able to talk about and address, and that doesn't mean that they're never removed from a situation, but we usually go with them. There's a conversation that happens. We're validating that whatever they're feeling is appropriate for them in that moment. And let's talk about how we can move past this. We can calm down. We can act differently next time.
Well, I think there's a lot of value to reminding yourself what you're doing here. And you brought this up earlier, Melissa, about the responsibility of raising a human being from scratch. And one of the things that I my observation is a lot of people tend to be too far on one end of the spectrum where they don't take the responsibility as heavily as they should, or people, we have people in our lives like, I don't ever want to have kids. Oh, it's too much. I can't do it. Like, or they make it to be this like insurmountable thing that we haven't been doing for thousands and thousands of years, right? Like you got here because people are effectively having children and raising them. So it lies somewhere in between there. But we have a tendency to get caught up in our own schedules or plans or expectations for the day. And I think for myself personally, that's been another huge lesson through plant medicine stuff, is removing expectation around things. So a really good example, and we'll do this frequently with clients as well, is use examples from our lived experience, our life. The other night the house was like all crazy. We had just moved my sister back in from her apartment. So there's just stuff everywhere. And it was dinner time. Melissa's like, oh my God, how am I going to clean the kitchen? There's just shit all over the counters. And, or how am I going to cook? And I said, let's just go out to eat. Like, we don't really go out to eat a whole lot. Let's just do it. I know I think it was like a Monday or Tuesday night or something like that. We'll go out to eat. I'm sorry, I'm mixing the story up. It wasn't that one. It was a different night. So anyway, we're going out, getting ready to go out as a family, and our oldest just starts having this irrational tantrum about what she's wearing and not wearing, and she wants to have everyone in matching uniforms when we go out. And it escalated into this like insane explosion by her, emotional explosion from her. And this has happened a couple of times where we're recognizing that the impending move, doesn't know how to process it, and she's excited in many ways. And she also has a group of very close friends for the first time, being 6.5. So she also recognizes that she's not going to see them after this. So every once in a while, she has one of these just like meltdown, seemingly out of left field things. And we tried to get her calm for a while. We tried her typical, strategies. We'll sit with her and breathe and talk to her, and it just wasn't working. So I turned to Melissa. I said, take Aubrey. Like, you and my sister and Aubrey go out to dinner. I'm going to stay here with her. And that escalated Dylan more. She got more upset. I just sat with her during it. I let her get out everything she needed to get out, and I just kind of held space for her. And I'm like, do you want a hug? And she hugged me. Eventually she calmed down. It was, after they left, maybe 10, 15 more minutes of throwing this fit. And then her breath was regulated. A lot of times I got into practice, even when the girls were little, of like holding them to chest and breathing with them, like doing big, deep breaths with them, trying to help them co-regulate. So we did that for a little while, and then she was good. And I said, how about you and Daddy go out and just Daddy Dylan date? And went and did our thing. And I think you see a scenario like that, and a lot of parents that I talk to, they get stuck in this idea like, well, we're supposed to all go out to dinner. We're all going to fucking do it. No, man, I don't care if you're all unhappy. We'll go out there. We'll all be miserable in public together. And it's just like, why are you doing that? What happens if you don't go out to dinner? Or if you do like the example of what we did, where it's like you guys go and they ended up having a wonderful night. I had a wonderful night with Dylan. She was great. We had a great time. And so being able to be flexible enough in those situations is another thing that is really valuable in working with parents specifically, and sharing our own experiences of when the tools and strategies that we talk about don't seemingly work right away or in the way that we had anticipated, and letting them know like that's okay too, that sometimes you got to call an audible,
Yeah. I'm trying to think of some other ways that we parent intentionally. Daily routines. So like I talk to a lot of parents that are like, sometimes we eat dinner at 6 o'clock, sometimes we eat dinner at 8. My toddler goes to bed at 9:30 and I don't have any time, and they sleep in my bed. And I'm like, that's not helping anyone. So like from the get-go, we really made an effort to like, this is what a nighttime routine looks like. We eat dinner, we get ready for bed, we read books. Just so the expectation, like what benefits us as adults benefits more for children, right? So keeping that for them, and and so they understand that consistency. Our mornings look relatively consistent, you know, and then I was going to say balancing between this like very healthy lifestyle and also being able to be quote unquote normal in the real world, like being able to go to a birthday party and having a cupcake and not being the weird kid that's not allowed to do that. So having open conversations with our kids about, you know, these things are treats, these things are things that are going to make you feel good, and avoiding the like good bad when you talk about food specifically, but like, what is food meant to do? Why would you choose to eat something or not eat something? Or, you know, when it's appropriate to have a cupcake and not appropriate in our eyes to have a cupcake. So yeah, having those open conversations with them so they understand. I think we've done better as we've progressed through parenting. Like early on, we were a little more on the judgmental side of people that like allowed their kids to do that more often.
And Dylan was a little more weird. Remember when she went to her first birthday party? She was like 2.5, and she's like, "Look at these colored rocks, little rocks," as a bowl of M&Ms. I'm like,
we're like,
yeah,
are we proud or are we failing? What's that? Yeah.
But what it sounds like is you guys have sat down and really created your pirate code for how you want to live your life and raise your kids and have your family, and you have that code in place, and you're not following, like, to use all the pirate terms, you know, you guys are using that compass rather than following someone else's map on how life should be led and how you raise your children, which is amazing.
100%. It's a great way of putting it. And we've, from day one, the conversations on the couch when Melissa was pregnant with Dylan, it was, these are our pillars. These are our the directions, the compass that we're going to use to guide us. Let's stick to them like 85% of the time. I think that's another thing that gets really challenging, regardless of how someone wants to live their life, is an expectation that you're going to hit that mark 100% of the time. It's just not going to happen.
Well, and I think
there's too many variables.
Mention flexibility, you know. 99% of the time we read books before bed, but sometimes we have a family movie night and we stay up past bedtime, or we eat cookies on a Tuesday, or, you know, and I think that that's all part of it, and it's a great part of it. And
beyond being part of it, it's important to, again, for us to share that with people. So whether we're working with couples or parents, or even individuals, sharing your humanity, whether you're a coach or not, around your family or friends, like sharing the parts of you that are fallible, where you mess up, or you like, that gives people the ability to connect with you in a way that's very different than just offering solutions all the time and offering, you know, this is the way. And then they have this idea in their mind. I mean, owning the gym, we saw that all the time. People were like, "Oh, you don't understand what it's like to try and keep yourself in shape because you guys are just so fit." I'm like, I am a fat kid at heart. When I stop any of this stuff, I just get fat, all in the middle of my body. Like, that's what happens. And same thing with our relationship, and the same thing with parenting. We'll get those sort of comments. Melissa would get them a lot with clients in the gym that were having issues with their relationships, their romantic relationships and stuff. And they'd say, "Oh, well, you don't understand because you and Chad just have this, like, you guys are just, you get it. You're in flow." I'm like, yeah, now, first 12 years of our relationship, we weren't.
Yeah.
It was anything but.
I mean, I think anything we work on and try to implement in our life comes from awareness and then specific intention. Yeah. And I think going back to like talking about reactive, like being reactive, I think a lot, that's where parents are stuck. They're in this reactive mode where life is happening to them and they have no control over their kids, over their schedules, over what they're eating. So it gets away from them, and then it becomes something that's so big, and like the thought is to even start to tackle it is
it's daunting.
It's just way too daunting. So, you know, if you can start to implement small things, like it's going to be harder if you have a 13-year-old or a 7-year-old that's been eating, you know, mac and cheese and chicken nuggets for their whole life, for them to start eating some vegetables. and you can still start to try.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's been the two biggest things for us, is we've gotten to a great point where we are aware, very aware.
Mm-hmm.
And even if the choices are not the choices we want, even if we're not showing up as the best people that we want to show up, at least we're aware of it.
Yeah.
Right. And we're talking about it, and we're starting to implement making changes to get back. Right.
See, you're
And
ugly.
then,
Yeah, I was going to say that's one of the things that you said that was I really like, is that not only are you talking about like the wins and what you're grateful for each day, but you're talking about the ugly, right? Because there's that whole thing of like toxic positivity, right? And it's not all just fakely positive. We do make mistakes. We get to be human and fallible, and to reflect on that each day, and teaching that to even your kids to learn to like reflect on that each day, and how can I do this better tomorrow or next time the situation comes up, is huge, right? Like those are the lessons that we should be reflecting on.
Yeah, and making sure to with that to explain, like there's a number of times I've explained, especially to our oldest, we want you to find an ugly from yesterday, not because we want you to focus on the negative, but because these are lessons. These are good things to look at. It's valuable to look at. I'm personally acutely aware of conversation with my sister. She's in mental health and stuff. We talk about negative neural networking, and from people who have a lifetime of trauma or grew up in traumatic homes and all these different things, where your brain is just wired so heavily to identify with the negative, that I want to make sure that, and I know what that feels like, and I'm working to right that ship in many ways. And so when we do talk about the ugly, we also add in that this is a way for you to look at something and get a lesson out of it and get value. It's not anything to be ashamed of or feel guilty about, and we'll say things right in front of them. Like I'll say, I lost my temper with the girls yesterday and I yelled at Dylan and it wasn't right. And I can take a few more breaths. I can calm down in the situation. So showing that we're participating in that too, and looking at these things as lessons and opportunities, and not as something to feel guilty or shameful about, is also a very valuable kind of addition to that piece as well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, you said what along the lines of what I was going to add was like the wins happen because of the ugly. Like without the ugly, you don't have a win on it. Really, like everything becomes a win. You don't see the wins anymore. Like, hey, this was great. Hey, this is great. It's a necessary thing to acknowledge that there is the ugly. Just like a storm makes the sun coming out beautiful, or 100 days of dry weather makes a storm beautiful. Like you need the ugly to appreciate the beauty, to appreciate the win. So being able to acknowledge, like, this is the ugly. Hey, there's a win in there right there, because this lesson becomes my win. I'm learning, I'm growing. And so, yeah, it's super cool too, to be able to point that out to them.
Yeah, I'm going to add that to my journal, because I celebrate my wins every day, but I don't reflect on the ugly. So I'm adding that starting today. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming at it from a place of curiosity, and even that is talking to parents as well, is like, try to get curious about if there's something your kids are doing that drives you nuts. You may not ever get the answer, or you may not get the answer you want. Ask the question at least. You'll start to understand a little bit more, and they'll start to understand that you're interested in what they're thinking and why. Kids do wacky shit. They got way more options than we do, right? They're way more creative. Right? They've been crushed. Their creativity hasn't been crushed by things the way it has for most adults. So there's a lot of times where something just seems so illogical. And if you ask the right series of questions of your kids as to why they're saying it or doing it, then you can get to the root of like, oh, okay, that's why they're doing it this way. Or they get to sit back and go, I don't know. And, something to think about, huh? Maybe figure out why you're punching your sister. Is there a different way to do this? And so I think that the leading with curiosity is really valuable, and it allows you to analyze the ugly, the failures, the mistakes, whatever you want to call them, the opportunities. It allows you to analyze them from a place of learning and growth rather than from a place of beating yourself up.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So where can our listeners go to find out more about you guys and about Inner Architect and the work you're doing?
Hit us.
Our Instagram is just Inner Architect, I believe. Let me double check. I don't know if there's any
Little underscores.
Yeah.
I think there's
most of what we're doing right now is on Instagram. We will have a website soon. We will have
A physical
a
location
physical location once we're down in
before the end of
Florida.
the year.
But we are working with some couples specifically right now, some families. If they wanted to do some remote work, we're open to that. Yeah, it's inner_architect_ on Instagram is the easiest way to find us.
And whereabouts in Florida are you going to be?
Sarasota area.
Yeah. My goal on our Instagram page right now is just kind of laying that foundation and giving some tools, workable tools for people to just start implementing and thinking about. We are teachers by heart. We went to school for teaching. We taught for 5 years, essentially taught in our gym for 11. So our ultimate goal, pretty much with anything we do, is to educate people.
Educate and empower.
Yeah,
I want people to be able to. It was one of the things that within the gym space, specifically with personal training, that I've always talked to our coaches about is, and when I took clients on personally, I don't want you to need me. I want you to work with me to establish the understanding and the concepts and the things that you need in order to be empowered and do it yourself. Because it's just, there's no real value. There's no lasting value if you constantly need someone to validate or empower or direct you all the time. Then you're removing your ability to act with agency in your own life when you do that. So we bring that to everything we do, really. Yeah. And this area of coaching is the same way. And I think for some people, if they're not ready for it, it can be frustrating. But for those who are they start to be like, oh, I know what you're going to say. I know the question you're going to ask me right now about this. And I'm going to ask you, what could you do about this? Yeah. Or what, whatever the topic is. Yeah.
One of our other main goals when we're down in Florida for our space is going to be connection. I think that especially during the last few years of COVID, we've lost some of that personal, like real life connection. And for parents specifically, I think for whatever reason, society tells us that like it's supposed to be easy. Like if you admit that it's hard, that you're a bad parent, and if you admit that you're struggling, that you're doing something wrong. And my goal, especially for moms, but it's going to be for parents and stuff as well, is to be able to be in a room with people that are going through the same things and have you feel validated that this is hard. Parenting is the most rewarding thing and the hardest thing ever. Right. And it's something you have to do every single day. So, I mean, you don't have to, but you want to keep your kids around. So yeah, that'll be our other goal, be to have parents feel connected and
supported and
heard.
Supported,
yeah.
So then the next question is, how would you recommend that our listeners go on and start their own pirate journey, their pirate life? What actions do you recommend to them?
Audit your life.
Yeah. Yep.
Step one is awareness, right? What areas is your life not pirate enough? Where could you do these things? Where could you find room for growth? What are the areas that you feel the most stagnant or compressed or stuck in? And so it starts with just looking at those things, taking some time to really write it all down, personally, professionally, your family relationships, your friendships, and asking yourself some hard questions. There's some people in our lives who were deeply embedded in our life a few years ago that are essentially not a part of our life for one reason or another now. And there's a piece of that makes us sad. And there's also a part of us that, we understand that people grow and they go in different directions and they change, and relationships they evolve. And sometimes that evolution means they fizzle out or end, or they become more platonic kind of acquaintance type things. And so I think it's a hard thing for us to let, for people say they don't like change. We used to hear this a lot in the gym. I hate change. Well, too fucking bad. That's life. Life is always changing every moment. Right. And so finding where can you embrace some change that on the other side of the difficult part is going to ultimately lead you to a place where you feel better and happier. So it's starting to just identify those things first.
Yeah.
What would be your next step?
I was going to say, the first thing we do with people, couples or otherwise, in our coaching is establishing core values. So even like, what is important to you? What are those values, so that you have a North Star to work on, like to evaluate the rest of your life. And once you've established those things, like especially as a couple, like making sure that even if they're different, how do they come together and how do you support each other to do that, so that again you're moving towards that North Star together, right? So establishing I can't say that word. Establishing what those things are. Yeah.
Then pick one and do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like pick one thing, and maybe it's an easy thing, and just do it. Do that one thing and create some momentum. Right? Well, momentum's difficult to start, but once you have it going, it's a lot easier to maintain. And so I think awareness, the core values, I love it. And just drawing that attention to what is out of alignment with these core values, what's out of alignment with the way I want to live my life, what's something that's pretty immediately actionable that I could do. Maybe it's an environmental thing. Like I shouldn't watch so much TV, right? Take all TVs out of your house. Or leave one instead of having one in every bedroom, leave one in the main living room. It's like something simple that is, especially we love environmental changes like that, because it's like one action and you're done. It's not necessarily you have to do it daily sort of thing, to create that momentum, and then just start working your way through that list of changes that you want to see. And it doesn't have to be uprooting your whole life, right? It can be for some people. For some people, it's just making a series of smaller shifts in their day-to-day that's going to put them in a place where they're way happier. So understanding that about yourself.
I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think a lot of people don't start this pirate life because they think that it has to be so far.
Yeah, they're like, I got to sell all my shit and live in the woods.
Yeah, it needs to be so rebellious, right? And we talked about it at the beginning of COVID. We're like, let's buy a van, let's homeschool our kids, let's eat out of the woods. Like we're like, let's pump the brakes. We were a man with 2 children, so, but yeah, we didn't even talk about how we school our kids, but yeah, I think that understanding that pirate life can happen in small steps, and those small steps done consistently equal big change, over time.
For sure.
And our final, most important question of the entire podcast. Do you have any pirate jokes you'd like to share with us?
I do.
Go ahead.
Do you?
Yeah. Ladies first.
Ladies first.
How do you save a dying pirate?
How?
By giving him CPR.
And I believe it was some great philosopher that said, to err is human and to err is pirate.
That's so good. Both of them are so good, and ones we haven't heard before. So congratulations this far along in our game here. To bring us 2 new jokes is quite special.
And thanks again for chatting with us today. We had a lot of fun.
Yes.
Likewise.
Thank you guys so much.
We appreciate the invite. This is great. Thank you.